No stress.
Welcome to Sacred Spirit Podcasting. I'm Lynn Cockrum-Murphy, and I'm here to share with you a guest, which I'll get into in just a second. But I'm also here because this is meant to always be a spiritual and interactive podcast. So I brought a guest in today, not so much to focus on spirituality, and you'll see why in just a second. This is Doug Murphy. He's quite a Renaissance man. He refers to himself that way, but so do we. A Renaissance man is a person with many areas of knowledge. And you'll see that's true. Doug has worked in social services, nonprofits. He's been a journalist. He has worked in law enforcement. And Doug, we're so happy that you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. So usually the focus of this podcast is on spirituality, but I chose to interview Doug because when people are in unhealthy relationships, the person, male or female, is focused on their physical and their safety needs. And therefore, they're less likely to be able to follow through with their spiritual practices. So one comes before the other. So it isn't that spirituality is impossible for them, but it's kind of that you have to have your priorities, and safety is a priority. So Doug was going to talk with us about safety and resources. But Doug, through your work, what are some of the warning signs that you've learned to recognize that means that a woman might be in danger of being taken advantage of, or even worst case scenario, of being trafficked?
Sure. Domestic violence is really unbelievably common in the United States and in the world. Like the Center for Domestic Violence thinks that about 1 out of 4 women have had some kind of a domestic violent kind of experience, and that 1 out of 9 men have also uh, forced to do something that you didn't want to do, prevented from doing something that you wanted to do, that sort of thing. So it's really common. The the warning signs kind of start off small, and it could be just when you're dating somebody that they want you to spend more time with them and less time with your friends. They don't want you to spend time with your friends. They get uh, they get kind of forceful when it comes to wanting you to do what they want and not what you want. Controlling money as things escalate, controlling money, controlling things like a cell phone, not allowing somebody to have a cell phone, or wanting to constantly search their cell phone to see who they've been talking to, who they've been, what websites they've been going to, things like that. It's just an escalating process. And domestic violence, trafficking, all of those things, it's got nothing to do with love. It's got nothing to do with caring for somebody, although the perpetrators will often tell you that they love you. And that's why they don't want you to go see other people, because they love you so much, they want you to spend all your time with them. Um, but it's just power and control. It's just power and control. And so they have the power and they control you.
I'm glad
And
you mentioned
like,
that, because it
yeah,
is, it sounds very controlling, and that it happens to
oh
both
yeah,
to men and women. Because I do remember from my teen years, a girlfriend's mother attacking her father in front of us. And I was
Mhm.
truly shocked. Then, and then also seeing that the children got involved trying to stop it, and that was a huge family drama. The so
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
women is what we're most aware of, and it is the majority of them. I thanks for those statistics too, because it is much worse than I think we generally think. So,
And again, it can start. It can be really simple too. With somebody, and just teasing you or name calling, even things like that. It's one thing to be teasing with somebody, but when it becomes a power kind of a thing of somebody putting you down, well, now it's not just two peers who are kind of joking with each other. Now it's becoming somebody trying to hold you down and push you down. Something to remember.
right, it's the kind of joking or teasing that you
Hmm.
don't find funny, and that's because it really isn't.
Right.
Yeah, it's at
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
expense.
Yeah. They're making fun of you.
So, do you hear or did you hear from the people that you've worked with, but I love him, and therefore they go back?
Oh, and yes, and you hear that, and and it can also be very true that someone you've lived with, had children with, um, you can love them and hate how they treat you all at the
Mm.
same time. They're not diametrically opposed. There's so many reasons why people stay in those relationships. Fear, just plain outright fear. I've seen situations where, um, and they're usually men with women as victims, but they'll threaten to, kill the dog, to, put the goldfish down the garbage disposal if you don't do what I say. There are instances where they threaten to kill the kids, and in the end, they'll threaten to kill the person if they don't do what they tell them to do. So fear is obviously a huge one, but also, it can also be like normalized abuse too. If you grew up in a family where mom hit dad all the time, then you just kind of expect that when you grow up, that
Oh,
yeah, you hit people. When dinner doesn't arrive on time, dad always slapped mom, so what's the problem with you slapping your girlfriend? That's just what people do. And if you've been the victim of that, it can seem like that's normal. Can also feel like you just don't have any choices, that you don't have any options, that you don't have any control or power. And so, you can, if you have low self esteem, or the one I hate the most is that economic insecurity. I remember a woman whose husband worked away from the house for like 6 months out of the year, and made a boatload of money. And they had a nice house and, nice kids and everything. The good news for her was he was gone for half the year. So he didn't hit her and didn't hit the kids. But when he was back for those 6 months, he did. And she felt she loved him, and she felt like she had no option. She had no real marketable skills, and she had no real way to support, kids and a family. She had a very nice home, a nice car, and everything. And so she knew she knew how to handle him, and what to do when he got mad, and how to keep him from getting too violent. And she stayed. And that's very frustrating for people who are friends or on the outside looking in at, and you can see what's going on, and what's going on, and you can probably guess exactly what the victim should do, but you can't do anything about it. You can't save anyone. You can't fix anyone. You've got to wait until they come to the realization, and until it crosses that tipping point where what they're getting out of the relationship is no longer more than the abuse that they're taking. I
I
don't know if I
think
said that very clearly or not.
one of the points that you're making
Mhm.
is that for the children, they very might well grow up to become victims or perpetrators of relationship
Well, yeah,
abuse. And therefore, it
sure.
would be a really great thing for getting the children out of that household and getting them some counseling or doing family counseling for the three of the parent, the mother, and the children to help prevent all that, to resolve that stuff.
Break that cycle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
break that cycle. The other thing I wanted to ask you is what kind of options do they have? What kind of resources do they have?
Every city, every town, every county, all across the country, there are domestic violence shelters, there's domestic violence agencies, there's places that you can go for help. There's a national domestic violence organizations that are there with toll-free 800 numbers. They're all they're all available and all want to help somebody. And so there is things out there. There is help for housing, and there is help for even getting work and everything, so that a woman who hasn't been in the workforce for years can get back in and support herself and take care of herself. But I just got to reiterate that until the person is ready to draw the line and do something, it doesn't matter how many resources there are out there.
Okay.
Um, there's an interesting quality that we all have, that anybody ever worked in a job that they didn't like, and we tend to stay. I've done that. We tend to stay in a job like that because we know where we are right now. If we leave that job, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to get a better job or a worse job, if we're going to make more money or less money, if we're going to dislike it more than we dislike what we have. So we stay where we are. For a lot of people in these domestic violent kinds of situations, it's the same kind of thing. They know what they know. They know what sets their partner off. They know what's going to happen if they make them mad. They know what they can try to do to keep them from being mad. They don't know what's going to happen if they leave. They That's the big unknown, and they don't know what's going to go on. And so it makes it doubly difficult for victims to leave those abusive situations. And this is for people who are dating, for people who are married, for people with kids, for people without kids. Making that decision to leave can be tough,
Do
very
you
tough.
do you think that alcohol abuse is one of the causes of the problem?
I don't know. I don't know that I've ever read one way or the other, but I know through experience, seeing people, that the more you drink, the more your inhibitions are lowered, and the more you're liable to do something that you might not do otherwise.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay. Then
yeah.
there are different types of abuse, aren't there? Because it seems like there's types of abuse that aren't physical.
Oh, yes, emotional abuse. We go back to that name calling and belittling and
Belittling.
putting somebody down, that sort of thing. That's as traumatizing to a person as hitting them. As a matter of fact, I mean, let's face it, we can hurt people more with words sometimes than we can with our fists. I mean, if you hit somebody, yeah, you're going to cause a bruise, and you know. But the things that some people can say, that can really cut
Mm.
and make somebody feel just like they'd like to die. It's just horrible. So that verbal abuse, physical abuse, you'd mentioned a little bit about sexual trafficking early on. You know, it's amazing. People with low self-esteem who have never had any attention paid to them, suddenly somebody offers to, get them a Louis Vuitton purse or a nice scarf or a fancy cell phone. And oh, they get all excited with the attention. And then when it turned around and say, I appreciate that, but that that purse I got you was $400, and that took a lot of my money. If you'll just go sleep with this guy tonight, he'll pay you $200, and that would really help me to balance my books.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, suddenly they feel like, oh yeah, you've been so nice to me. I'll do something nice for you. I'll sleep with this stranger, and hopefully you don't get beaten up too much, and then you $200, and now the next day you're out on the streets, and he expects you to bring in $1,000 by the end of the night, or he's going to be really pissed off.
Yeah.
And it's that control and domination and taking advantage of somebody by just giving them a little bit. They're willing to do things that they normally would never think of doing.
It's interesting you use the euphemism sleep with, because really it's just having sex with. It's not making
Oh
love.
yeah.
It's not sleeping. It's pure
No, it's got nothing to do with that.
sex that the
I
other
remember.
person expects done their way. So it's not even necessarily pleasant.
Oh yeah, no. There's nothing pleasant about any of that. It's just control and power. It's not love and affection. No, that's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's a real important point, that we've gone from I love him and I'll stay, but those relationships are about control and power. And even in the sexual portion of the relationship, where you would expect to see love and caring played out, no, it's power and control.
Yeah.
Well, so would you talk again about resources women have? I know that I took a woman into my home and her children for several weeks, so she could hide from her husband until she could figure out how to get established. And he'd never heard my name. He didn't know anything about me. So it was safe to have her. And she is, divorced and doing beautifully today, just thriving and working and bringing in money in the field that she's trained in. It's just amazing how well she did. But it was because she had a safe place to go with support during her transition. And I'm wondering, would you recommend that or not recommend that? I mean, I feel like what we did worked really well, but should people just go to a shelter or use family and resources?
Well, and the answer is yes. The first resource for anybody who's in a situation like that are their friends.
Okay.
Being supportive, not judging them, not telling them that X is a deadbeat and you should have left him 100 years ago, and you're stupid for not leaving him. That's not supportive. But being supportive, and also being supportive in the sense that you've got to wait until they're ready. You can mention every once in a while that this just doesn't look, you have bruises. I worry about you. And that's enough for them to know that when it comes time for them to actually leave or do something, that you will be there to support them. and I don't mean support them, financially or giving them a house or anything, but they need friends. Um, and they need friends who can acknowledge once they do decide that they're going to leave that this what they're doing is difficult and hard and it requires a lot of bravery, so that really supportive friends. um, you can call helplines. You can call there are people around, toll-free numbers. As a matter of fact, I have the hotline for the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Their number is 800-799-7233. You
And
can
that's
call them.
the international hotline?
That's a that's a national coalition against domestic violence, and they can hook you up with somebody locally who can help. I want to remind people that if you're in a situation like that and you do call, check check your phone, check your call history. You may need to delete that
You can
number so that
delete
it
it.
doesn't show up that you've called that. There are also websites for domestic violence. Your website search could still show up in the computer, but a lot of those sites attempt to delete the history that you went to their site by
Oh,
clicking
good.
on some things so that people can't go back and look in your phone or look in your laptop and say, hey, what were you doing with these people? So there
Good.
are
Let me
agencies
check the
around.
phone number because I don't think I have it right. It's 800-990.
Nope, 799
Oh, that's supposed to be a
799
seven.
7233.
Glad I checked. Okay, 797233. Okay, thank you for that. I put that in the chat. So if
Sure,
anybody wants that, there it is.
good. Then when people are ready to actually go, there are agencies around. And I'll be honest with you, um, there's more demand than there are beds available in domestic violence shelters and in domestic violence organizations. There's more demand than there are services available. But making that making that contact, talking to a counselor, starting to prepare a plan, by the time you do actually decide to walk out the door yourself with your kids, however it works, um, hopefully there'll be a plan in place so that you can move forward. I'll also be really honest with you that when you do decide to go, the perpetrator might get really, really upset. He may want to try to stalk you. He may want to try to find you. He may want to try to find you at work, things like that. This is where, again, your friends who support you and care for you. I have worked in places where, two or three of the biggest guys at work will walk somebody out to their car each
Yes.
night to make sure that nobody hassles them, and will be hanging around in the parking lot in the morning when they come so they can walk them in to make sure nobody hassles them. This
Nice.
is where friends can come in handy.
Okay.
And the same thing with the police. File police reports.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
people are reluctant to do that, but I see it as really valuable. One case where I worked with a child and the mother was being hurt. She had called the police so many times, they would still come, but they started advising her that she was in a progressive situation and it was going to get worse. Would she get herself and the kids out of there now? Would she use the resources to prevent it from ending in worst case scenario? I also put the information for you, Mom, into the chat box. I didn't include the phone number, but I like that organization, although they're overwhelmed, I think, with numbers. But I like that organization because when they can, they find a home for the mother and the children. So the children aren't left
Mhm.
behind and the mother can protect them too.
Yeah. And obviously, if it's hard to find a bed in a domestic violence shelter for a woman, imagine trying to find space for a woman and two or three kids.
Right.
It's, even harder.
Right.
So,
You mentioned bruises, and I just wanted to follow that up with how we have social norms that make it really difficult to say anything when a woman has bruises. That I remember one of the parents of one of my students wore really big dark glasses because it was pretty apparent she had a black eye. And I just I was so wanting to say something and couldn't because of the social norms, like none of my business, and it's not like she's a close friend, and maybe I'm wrong, and what if she gets upset, and all those reasons, and I didn't say anything. It's
mhm.
yeah, it takes a lot of bravery on the part of the person who wants to help too.
It's and that's a normal reaction to seeing somebody, uh, and then the response is imagine the embarrassment and the shame and everything of the victim.
Right.
Um, And how many people do we know have ever actually walked into a door and caused a black eye on themselves?
True.
It doesn't happen. And yet, how many people, say, wow, that looks bad. What happened? Oh, I ran into a door. I tripped over my dog. I hit myself with
Right.
weights while I was at the gym.
Hmm.
No, these things don't cause damage. But again, that person, that victim, they're embarrassed, they're ambivalent about how they feel. They may be in fear, just
Yes.
absolute
Terror.
total terror
Yeah.
of the perpetrator finding out and suddenly turning on them.
Yeah.
There could be any number of things. So
Well, I liked what you
it's
said about
it's just
use your resources, use your friends. And
yeah.
it seems also that when you make a plan to get out, that you take the kids and the pets with you, and that people will do their best to help you find a place for them. I've taken in
Yeah.
I've taken in people and pets to help, and I think most people would, at least temporarily, until we can find a better situation.
And it's it's a difficult process, but each step gets you a little farther away from that situation and gets things a little better. Um, yeah, there's going to be tough times, and yes, it's going to be difficult. But think about that terror of trying to sleep at night and afraid that they're going to get upset for some reason. Think about the things that they make you do. If you love them, you'll
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, just think about being able to get away from that. And I can't stress enough, friends. Most domestic violence perpetrators try to separate victims from their friends so that they don't have any support structure. That person you see at work who's afraid to talk, or you've noticed changes in them where you used to hang out, maybe go to happy hour after work. Now you don't see them anymore. you know try to let them know that you're still there
Oh,
for them.
okay.
That if there's anything they want to talk about, that you're willing to listen. And it will feel overwhelming, when somebody, it's just horrible things that happen. And when somebody finally breaks down in the break room at work, or somewhere, and starts to tell you what's going on, what's happening to them, may not involve any physical injury, but it could involve a lot of emotional, and verbal kind of abuse, and you start to hear that, most normal people just kind of get sick to their stomach. I'm like, oh my God, be there,
Okay.
talk to them. How are we going to make a plan? Do you want to use my phone to call somebody about what to do next? How about we'll use the computer on my desk to, go search for something,
Good idea.
those sorts of things. If you want to bring, when women are going to leave, like Lynn said, you want to take obviously the kids and the pets with you so that there's, nothing happens to them. But you might want to slowly start amassing paperwork. Get your social security card and maybe leave it at work in an envelope or give it to a friend to hold on to. And the next time you run across a birth certificate, you might want to take that and just kind of get it to a friend to hold on to so that when in fact you do leave, you've got yourself, you've got your paperwork, you've got everything you need to move forward with your life in a new way.
Good ideas. Thank you. Okay. So we know that there are many types of abuse. Doesn't always involve hitting. We know that when people are showing signs that you wonder might be abuse, it's a great thing to ask. Because if you're wrong, no big deal. And if you're right and they're willing to share, you've made a difference. And then also,
Even if they're not willing to share at that moment, you've let them know you're there and you're interested. And it might
okay,
be a week, a month, a year later when they turn to you. So
great.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And that there are resources, um, probably not enough of them, but there are resources, and friends will help, family will help if they can.
Well, as long as the family's not the perpetrators,
And
which is a
sometimes
really, something we don't like to talk about. But yeah, mom and dad can be
totally
abusing the
caught up in it.
children.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. There's every
Doing,
permutation possible.
yeah. There's, back in my training as a substance abuse counselor, we learned a lot about dysfunctional families, and it was fascinating about how when you try to change something within a dysfunctional family, how many of the family members will try to put it back because it's what their comfort zone was. As you said earlier, they're unfamiliar with the new, so they don't want to go there. So reading up on things like what is a dysfunctional family is empowering, because it names the dynamics that are going on, which makes you informed, which means you can do more because knowledge is power.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, well, Doug, is there anything else that you want to add before we finish today?
Remember, you can't save your friends, you can't fix them, but you can be there for them. And for people who are in a situation like that, it might seem like there's just no hope and there's nowhere to go and there's no way to end this. But there is a way. There are ways, and you can talk to people. You know,
Do
my
you know
degrees in
people?
his my degrees in history, so I'm not one of them to talk to. But you can call any of those domestic violence agencies, and they've all got counselors waiting there who can
Okay,
talk to you on the phone and kind of talk you through where you're at, find out what you're comfortable doing, what's available out there as far as a resource, and they can help to walk you through. And if you were to walk away today, this minute, there are churches, there are domestic violence
oh,
agencies. People
churches.
will spend hours trying to help you get away from the problem and to be safe.
Great.
Then they will work and do everything they can to help you.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned churches, because that is another resource.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, well, before we close today, I just want to invite the listeners to join in next week. I intend to have 2 podcasts again, and I will send out an announcement And I wanted to invite listeners to visit my webpage, which is Cockrum-Murphy.com. And there's a hyphen in there between Cockrum and Murphy, LynnCockrum-Murphy.com. I hope to see you there. You can reach out to me. There's a contact form on the page. So if you have something to ask, or if you are wanting to look at some of the services I offer and consider that, I would love to hear from you. Doug, thank you so much for your time and all that information. I believe it can make a difference.
I hope if you need help, you get help.
Absolutely. Okay, bye for now.
Yeah.